Hey guys, this is What If Deku Had Magic Part 4. Now, I know I've been gone for a while, let's just dive right into this fanfiction. So I've been gone for a while, guys, and enough of me just talking. I know you guys don't really care. Well, you might care, but I don't really want to go into detail, but I've just been busy with school, and I'm sorry that I haven't been recording videos, uploading videos, and giving you guys the content and promising you guys the amount of content I was going to give you, and I'm going to be jumping onto that, getting at least 5 to 4 videos a week, every week from now on my soul. But let's just dive right into this fanfiction. So we start our story off with, well, last time we left off. Now, go back to the video, you're going to watch it, but sorry, most of the video was a black screen, editing error, but let's just dive right into what happened last time. What happened last time is a little bit of, just say, soul magic shenanigans, the villains attacking, and just the USJ event happening incredibly differently. But just go watch that to get caught up to the story. We see that Deku gets told by the spirit that something's going on in Japan. We get switched to the next day as Deku is in class. Or not the next day, because it's been a couple days since the whole USJ event. So Izuku has a few more days left of no school, and that's one of the few days, this point of time, where things happen a lot different. But we start our story off with Izuku Midori. Well, this main story. Enough of the exposition. Izuku's getting a call or getting a psychic, tug by the spirit that has been guiding him this whole entire time. The spirit starts to tell Izuku that something's going down in Japan and that it's up to him to figure out what it is. All he senses right now is that some sort of magic is dampening his omnipotency, or I guess his sense of danger for supernatural occurrences around the world has been dampened somehow. Something is interfering. So he needs to figure out what's going on and what's happening in Japan. Something big's happening in Japan, and it could lead to a complete spiral into the supernatural world and break the barrier between the worlds as we know it. With quirks being the thing is something else, but for it to be interlocked with supernaturals and humans being the same thing, being locked into the same world, them knowing each other, could lead to catastrophic outcomes. Izuku understands this and gets ready to go on a night jog to figure out what's going on. Izuku dons his wizard suit from Yue. Somehow, he was able to use a little bit of magic to conjure it up. Izuku goes down the street using a type of illusion spell to make everybody else that isn't supernatural, or anybody that sees him in a 2-mile radius, to see him in some sort of black or red hoodie. Izuku's walking down the night street trying to figure out what's going on. Izuku eventually crosses a corner, stopping in his tracks and looking back as he would have seen a woman getting snatched into an alleyway. Izuku runs out, letting go of his illusion, pretty much showing us his hero costume. Izuku dashes over a trash bag or a dumpster, doing an entire straight up Miles Morales jump flip into the alleyway, kicking the man down to the ground. Izuku looks over to the man, and the man tells him that you shouldn't have done that, little boy, as he pops fangs out of his mouth and his eyes start to glow bright red, or just kind of a maroon dark red. His orifices turn red. As Izuku's confused on what the hell's going on, as the man lunges at him in super speed, pushing him down to the ground, and the man tries to snap his neck or feed on his blood. And as you don't know already, this is a vampire. Izuku kicks him back as the man's skin starts to turn pretty much pale white, as his ears start to grow longer and his skin starts to become scaly in nature. He starts to grow claws, and the woman in the alleyway is starting to freak out. Izuku shoots a huge blast of light magic into the man's face, burning his skin, as Izuku grabs a woman and teleports them about a mile away. Izuku using a type of teleportation magic that does kind of eat away at his body. Izuku would have coughed up some blood, telling the woman to go away and run now. The woman would have ran off, saying thank you, as she would have ran away. Izuku would have looked back as he would have seen the man in the sky across the moon flying down Izuku, chucking Izuku into Degyo Beach. They would have been around the beach area, basically near the railing. Izuku being tugged into the sand. The man would have started to lunge towards Izuku. Izuku would have started to dodge, weave, and get out of the way, countering each entire attack, but also cutting himself in the process. Izuku would eventually almost get bit, but Izuku grabbing the man and chucking him over to the ground. Izuku would have gotten up, trying to conjure up the spirit and talk to it, and the spirit would have started to psychically communicate with Izuku, telling him that this is his first, altercation with the vampire. Vampires are very strong. Izuku says, what's about vampires? I didn't read too much on vampires, I'm sorry, I only really studied magic in the pocket dimension. As the spirit would have basically sighed, saying, let's do a little bit of a run-through over vampires. Vampires in this world, as I am the spirit, I'm telling you this, Izuku, vampires in this world are very different from all these fanfiction you see around the world. You humans are very, let's just say, disgusting with the fanfiction you make on vampires, but especially werewolves too. But enough of that. Let's talk more about what happens in this world. The vampires in our world, in the real world, are monstrous behemoth of creatures that can rip apart a person just by thinking, just by wanting to do it. They can do whatever they want. They still have the obvious weakness of sunlight. Wooden stake to a heart, silver stake to a heart also works, and also holy water does work. But all holy things like crosses, holy water, burials, and holy ground in a church, all that stuff only works on a vampire if they believe it itself. If they believe that religion before they were turned, that religion works on them. But let's just say he is an Egyptian vampire that got turned, or a Jewish vampire. Multiple different religions that ward off vampires, quote unquote, won't work on these things. And this is a Japanese vampire. And it's safe to say that he is doing Buddhism. It's a good amount of people in Japan that are Christian, but it's a very unlikely choice, and I don't want you to waste your time trying to find a cross. Izuku hits him back with, I don't really care, and just tell me what type of magic spell you use against this guy. The spirit says, well, say at least I'm going to make you do this yourself, and just stick to light magic, okay? Just figure it out. As the spirit leaves Deku high and dry. Deku was pissed, but Izuku jumps back, weaving and dodging, getting slashed against the chest as Izuku falls onto the ground. The vampires with a stomp Izuku out as Izuku dodges out the way, weaving and doing a back kick backflip, falling back to his ground as he would start to dodge and weave more and more attacks, doing a spinning front kick straight to the vampire's freaking noggin, but the vampire would have caught that shit, would have munched that delicioso, would have ate that, as he would have thrown Deku into the ground, chucking him into the water. The vampire would have lured over the water, trying to see where Izuku was, but Izuku would have gotten up, shooting a huge water attack, shooting a hole through the vampire's stomach. The vampire would have started to heal, but Izuku would have started to purify the water behind him using a type of holy magic. Izuku only having a few holy spells because it's not many holy or unsupernatural or demonistic creatures he's gone up against. In the last couple of weeks, he's been doing this whole supernatural keep the monsters at bay thing. But Izuku would have shot a huge blast of holy water towards the vampire, burning his skin off. Izuku was smirking, saying, so I guess you are religious, huh? As he would have started to try to conjure up a cross, using some sort of manipulation magic to bend the sand into a cross, kind of trying to melt it and make a glass cross. But the vampire would have lunged towards Izuku, grabbing him by the freaking face and straight up scalping this dude down to the ground. I mean, would have palmed my boy Izuku's whole entire head in his hand, and would have slammed him dead in the ground. He would start to pull Deku and would have started to try to smother him and drown him in the sand. Eventually, Izuku would have unleashed a huge blast of light magic, burning the vampire's hands clean off. The vampire would have started to lunge away or trying to fly away, but Izuku would have shot 2 light beams, cutting off the vampire's wings. Izuku would have looked over the vampires. The vampire, as I think I showed you a picture earlier, but let's just say the appearance of this vampire is more like the Van Helsing vampires, very monstrous creatures. As the vampire would have looked towards him, saying that you can't do this, that I'm just trying to survive. I thought you were, as Izuku said, I don't care. Izuku would have lunged an attack towards him, but the vampire would have disintegrated before he even touched him. Izuku looked over, seen a vampire, or not vampire, but some man in the corner of his peripheral vision, over the railing near Deku Beach, smirking as he would have started to take a turn and would have walked into the city. Azuka would have followed him using a bunch of magic or wind magic to propel himself forward, simulating flight, as he would have fell down into an alleyway after the man, as the man would have disappeared. We can switch to the next day as Azuka was in the pocket dimension figuring out or trying to figure out what's going on, what's happening, and why was there a vampire in Japan. The spirit tells him that the last sighting of vampires in Japan, to his knowledge, to all the technology and all the things he's trying to get figured out with his scanning and everything, the last sighting of a creature similar to a vampire was about 50 years ago. Vampires haven't been seen since in Japan for years. Azuka's confused, saying, so why are they here now? After 50 years, why are vampires moving back to Japan? The spirit just tells him that it must be something big, something very big, for them to come back to a place that was once filled with a bunch of wizards. To tell you this, Azuku, your father wasn't the only wizard in Japan during his time. It was 6 others, and most of those were vampire hunting wizards. Wizards that were descendants of Van Helsing himself. Azuka being confused, saying, hold on, you're telling me Van Helsing exists? The famous vampire hunter is a real thing. I know everything else is kind of real, but Van Helsing? The spirit tells him that Van Helsing is a very important type of character in their lore, in their history. After he slept down with a witch woman, he found love and compassion in some supernaturals. But after his wife died and the bloodline of the Van Helsings with magic began, he went on a rampage using his new bloodline, his new sons, trained them in all the ways he knew how to kill vampires and all other supernaturals like werewolves and warlocks, and not warlocks, but goblins and creatures of the night. Azuku saying, so if this place was filled with Van Helsings at one point, what happened? After 50 years, why did they come back? Azuku was told by the spirit that there are no more supernatural hunters in Japan. You're the last one. They don't know you because you've been doing all your missions across state, other places like South Carolina, Georgia, Texas, New Jersey, all these other places. You don't know what's really happening, don't you? Azuka's confused, saying, what do you mean? He says that Japan is a safe haven for most supernatural creatures. Supernatural creatures that don't kill or don't need to kill mainly stay under the radar in Japan. I don't tell you about them mainly because of the main fact that they don't kill anybody, they don't murder anybody, and they know how to control themselves. So, the pit is simple. I only been sending you after supernatural creatures and monsters that have no control, or either just choose to be monsters itself. Azuku's confused as he hits him with, so why haven't you told me about them? Azuku tells him that you don't need to be friends with a werewolf or be friends with some sort of monster. You don't need to know these creatures because they don't pose a threat to you, or anybody for that matter. They've gone years and years without killing people, and I don't think they're going to start now. Especially once the word of a new wizard has came around. You're the first wizard in decades to come to Japan, Azuku. The word of you is going to spread very fast, especially if a vampire saw you. Azuku is confused, but he says, I'm sorry. Come again? The spirit kind of just gets mad and tells Azuku just to tee up and do a little more research on vampires and to figure out what's going down in Japan and to figure out the inner workings of everything. But he gets switched about a couple more hours later as Azuku's in the training room trained against a illusion, or pretty much a simulation against a vampire. Azuka takes him down a few times pretty easily, but he kind of wants to simulate a new vampire. He says to try to use an old book. He goes back into the big library of books accumulated into the pocket dimension by 1,000 of the wizards over the times, over the years, over the decades. As eventually Deku looks at a specific book, the Book of Vampires, a book dedicated to every single thing, every little detail about vampire lore, culture, ethnicity, and how they were turned, how creatures can be taken down, and also a little bit of a myth about vampirism, a cure to it. But Izuku just scoffs at that, saying that there's no real cure to something that makes you undead. I don't think it's really a cure to that. But Izuku looks at the book and starts to go through old pages, eventually coming across the legend of Dracula. A creature that couldn't be killed by any other vampire needs. A creature that could take a wooden stake to the heart, a silver stake to the chest, could go into sunlight for multiple minutes and not feel a thing. He was stronger than any other vampire could ever come across, and the older vampires got, the less they needed to feed. The older they got, the less they needed to sleep. The older they got, the less they needed to actually do anything that normal vampires do that gave them away. Dracula was the strongest, most powerful, and most, let's just say, cruel monster of them all. A monster that only in your wildest dreams your wildest nightmares could you ever imagine. Deku got scared even reading this book and closed it immediately, as the spirit would have interrupted him, saying that you found out what you were looking for. You find what you were looking for. Izuku just stops and says, Why are they here? I know it's up to me to figure that out myself, since you can only do so much. But if my father knew how horrible these things were, why didn't he just take them out? Like Van Helsing, with the other wizards. The spirit, I don't know, Izuku. I don't know. Over the years, your father was mainly training on keeping the peace between supernaturals, committing mass genocide against vampires would be suicide for him and every other supernatural on the planet. It would cause an all-out war, and vampires would eventually rebel against the whole supernatural wall and reveal themselves. It would be massacre after massacre, species after species being extinct. You don't want that, Izuku. Izuku looked down at the book and closes it again after he looks through a couple more pages and tells him that spirit, you could say it, Izuku. No one's stopping you from saying what's on your mind. Then why am I doing this? Why am I the one that has to do all this? I fought a freaking... I fought a demon. I've gone against a Wendigo. I exorcised somebody. Why am I doing this? The spirit says that you didn't do an actual exorcism. You just dispelled a demon from a body with a simple spell. And it was a very weak demon. But the next thing you do have to do, about like next week, maybe do a couple exorcisms, is a big demon pandemic happening in Russia right now. Izuku scoffs and says, don't tell me that. I'm already stressing enough seeing a vampire for the first time. Pretty much what would happen is Izuku was told by the spirit that there is some activity down in downtown Japan about somebody sighted that had the ability to turn into a giant bat creature and kill people by sucking blood out of their body. Izuku says it's literally a vampire as he gets suited up, and the spirit throws him a sword, saying that this might help him on his journey, and it's a holy sword. Izuku sheaths it and puts it on his back as he goes on to his adventure or his mission. But enough of Izuku's story. I know last time, if you paid attention, there are other stories going on in this story. Other paths of destiny that is happening. And with that happening, let's switch to a story that we all might not know. A story that will change completely. Kirishima's story. So we can switch to Kirishima later that same night. That same night, Kirishima is chilling in his room as Kirishima is trying to figure out what happened there during the train arc. When he was fighting those guys, we do a little flashback, something happened. He was stronger than usual. He was faster than usual. He thought it was adrenaline, but he moved in ways he never even thought of. Things he did weren't even a part of his quirk. He jumped feet in the air, chucked grown men across the room like they were nothing. Even with a quirk that makes you somewhat invulnerable, that's not possible. Kirishima's confused on what's happening to him, but he gets snapped out of it after he hears a huge bang. He looks out his window and we can switch back to a few minutes earlier, getting a kind of a pre-credit precursor to what's happening now. We see Izuku walking down an alleyway or walking down the street of downtown Japan as it seems like a dead zone. No one's out, no one's up, and all the lights, doors, and everything is shut, closed. Izuku notices one light out of all of it opened as he looks behind himself and hearing a huge scream, being grabbed by a 7-foot tall behemoth of a vampire, getting chucked down to the ground. This vampire seems older and a lot more stronger. He grabs Izuku by the arm and starts to chuck him around like freaking Hulk did Loki. I mean, he starts to lock this man up. Izuku's going through the ringer, literally. Izuku's magical cloak or his suit's keeping him alive, but he gets thrown into a nearby trash can, causing a huge thud in the neighborhood. Pretty much causing the attention or pulling the attention of Kirishima. As he can switch back to the present, as Kirishima looks out the window, seeing Izuku in a dumpster behind his house. Izuku is told by Kirishima. Kirishima asks, "What are you doing here, Deku?" Or, "What are you doing here, Izuku?" Izuku looks up to him saying, "Nothing, go back inside." As Kirishima looks over and seeing this huge behemoth of a vampire in his front door, trying to mesmerize him into letting him in or to inviting him in. Izuku shoots a huge blast of light, shooting the vampire away, stopping the, pretty much impulsion from taking effect on Kirishima. But somehow, Kirishima didn't feel the effects. Kirishima jumps out the window, hardening himself, making a huge thud on the ground, telling Deku that we need to call the pro heroes. What is that thing? Izuku says to just stay under and just go back inside as he jumps over the fence he got thrown into out of Kirishima's backyard. Kirishima follows after him as they start to fight, and basically Kirishima says, "I'm not going to let you just do this alone, bro. I'm going to help you out, okay?" And it's the manly thing to do. It's the right thing to do. Kirishima is told by Deku to get on and go away. I don't want you getting hurt. Kirishima looks at Izuku, seeing that his bloody and his head's kind of cracked open a little bit. Well, not cracked open, it's cut. But you see what I'm trying to say. As Izuku was told by Kirishima that you kind of need to slow down. You look hurt yourself. Deku uses a healing magic and starts to heal himself up. Kirishima's amazed by this, but Kirishima gets told by Deku that this is his problem, his fight, and his solution. He needs to find out what's going on in Japan. And he doesn't want to, I don't want to bring you into this, Kirishima. I'm sorry, Deku, but you're a friend. And I can't just leave a classmate in need behind like this. You need help, and I'm going to help you. And if you could say or do, stop me from helping you. Fine. As they start to run after the vampire tries to lure them into a trap. Izuku stops midway as Kirishima follows after, but Kirishima gets tugged by the back of his shirt by Deku, telling him to stop and that something's coming. Izuku uses his type of magic awareness or magic danger sense to figure out what's going on. Izuku focuses in as he closes his eyes and sees flashes of monsters crawling over windows and crawling up buildings as he looks up, and it is a huge swarm of vampires cornering them. The man looks up as the man transforms into the man Izuku saw earlier, saying that, "I'm not who you think I am. I'm not the great Dracula, and I'm definitely not the last vampire you're gonna see. Maybe one of these guys will. What's happening in Japan is that it's none of your business." Izuku's confused, saying, how? He hits him with the huge truth that vampires have the ability to impulse people, give them use impulsion on people, right? But what you don't know is that we can also read minds to a capacity. Your mind is cluttered with so much fear. It's kind of tasty, really, but what I'm going to tell you, this is Izuku Midoriya, is that what you're doing here is suicide, and you might be the last wizard in Japan, and that's a big problem for us. You took down one of our newer vamps with little to a lot of difficulty. Imagine what vamps that are actually trained could do to you and your little mutt friend. Kirishima says, "What do you mean, mutt friend? Man, don't make me beat you up, bro." As he hits him with a huge truth, saying that, oh, you don't know. Oh, well, Guys, kill them before he finds out. As he flies off, as Izuku shoots a huge light bulb towards him, but a vampire takes it straight on, saving him and killing himself in the process. Literally, he has vampires that are ready to throw away their life for this man, for cover. Izuku notices this and tells him that we need to go now. Kirishima says, no, I'm not backing down on a fight. Deku tells him and grabs him and basically forces him to look in his eyes, saying that we need to go now. What you're doing here, what we're doing here, is suicide. I wasn't expecting these many things here, now, tonight, cornering us in a freaking alleyway. Izuku and Kirishima instantly start to do a run for it. Basically, Deku using a huge spells to basically blast holes through buildings, jumping through buildings and stores, and making a big ruckus around the city. The city starts to basically call the police, and pro heroes and police start to show up. Aizawa sees from afar, and Aizawa eventually shows up, and sees from afar that some sort of vampire is chasing after his students. Izuku notices that the police are coming as he uses that type of illusion magic to make himself look like he's wearing normal pretty much street clothes. Izuku starts to run, telling Kirishima that we need to do a turn for it, and that something big is happening behind them. They look back and they see a huge behemoth of a vampire flying after them, literally crawling in the sky, as they start to run even faster. Izuku sees Kirishima starts to change. Kirishima starts to run faster and faster as he grabs Izuku and starts to chuck even faster and faster. He starts to literally lunge. I mean, he's going incredibly fast. I mean, stupidly fast. They eventually come across an intersection as they start to jump over car to car to car. Kirishima jumps into a nearby forest, and they basically make shelter in a nearby sewage dump. The vampires slowly start to surely lose their scent since they're in sewage. They lose them as Izuku walks back to the cabin and basically tells Kirishima to go back home. Kirishima says that my home is probably flooded with vampires still, and also on top of the fact that my whole entire near neighborhood and also a couple other neighborhoods and buildings are destroyed because of that whole run. So I don't know, bro, but I think I want to stay with you. Deku sighs but says, okay, let's go. As Izuku's kind of being nervous a little bit, not trying to show too much, but he knows that something's happening with Izuku. Something's happening with Kirishima. He knows Kirishima's quirk isn't just being really strong. He has power, he has hardening, but he can't just jump and do incredible acrobatic skills like that just because adrenaline. Adrenaline can do a lot of things, but it can't make you unlock a new quirk out of thin air. Izuku walks into... Kirishima says, why are we going into this rusty, dusty... What the... Kirishima sees that the cabin has turned into an entire maze of libraries, rooms, doors, and all sorts of other openings and closes and rooms. Kirishima is surprised by this, saying, what happened? Where are we? As Deku says that this is a pocket dimension. And he basically tells Kirishima that I don't want you to tell anybody, okay? You need to keep this a secret between you and me, okay? Kirishima promises and says, okay, man, I got your back. But what were those things? Izuku tells him that those were vampires. Kirishima's confused. What do you mean vampires, man? Well, let's say this. Kirishima, vampires, witches, warlocks, werewolves, all those things exist. Every supernatural thing that you thought folklore-wise does exist. And it's all real. But I'm kind of in task to be the one that keeps the supernatural world at bay. Kirishima was confused, saying, wait, you're telling me that you're the sole reason, you're the sole protector of this whole entire world being discovered by the rest of the planet? Izuku says, pretty much, as he scratches his head nervously. Well, that's interesting. As they just look at each other, kind of laughing and chuckling as we hear a thud at the door. And I'm gonna leave it off here, guys. So, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. And as always, guys, have a blessed day. Before I go, yeah, part 5 is gonna be really gruesome, and some people will die. And I also am going to be covering the sports festival in part 5. Part 5 is gonna be a pretty long episode, so just get your thinking caps on for that part. But hope you guys enjoyed the video, because I can subscribe as always, guys. Have a blessed day. Deuces.